Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Joseph Noor. Now, Joseph is an innovator at the intersection of real estate and technology. And yes, it does involve a little bit of AI. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. As the co-founder and CTO of Ownwell, he's revolutionizing the way property owners manage their assets. Under Joseph's leadership, Ownwell is developing a cutting-edge technology solutions to reduce the costs and complexities of owning real estate. Joseph always approached life as an entrepreneur, flipping golf balls, building sneaker bots. I want to find out more about that later. Creating private MMORPGs, and I want to find out what that means too soon, because acronyms can be confusing for someone who's actually not in that industry. Saving money on property taxes. Joseph was raised with the mentality of relentlessly chasing the hardest problems, pushing past what was initially thought possible and leveling up the process. In the unrelenting demand for academic excellence, he was enrolled in elementary school 2 years early and was still pushed to skip grades. Enamored with the iPhone, he chose to study computer science to build software that scaled to the whole world. It wasn't until the PhD where he met his first real academic challenge, developing AI to self-optimize computer systems. Joseph, welcome to the show. It's actually fantastic to have you here, and I'm curious about many things in that bio and also what you're doing today and what you've done a bit in the past. So give me a thumbnail sketch of what you were really curious about as a teenager or a kid, because I think quite often what you do later in life can come out of what you were really curious about as a child or a teenager or a young adult. So what were you really curious about as a kid?
Yeah, that's a great question that actually I can't remember ever being asked before. So, when I was a kid, I grew up. I'm the son of immigrants, and there's like an immigrant mentality, especially for those that come to the U.S. because they're seeking a better life. And so my father is an absolute workaholic, and I really rarely saw him as a child. He would come home after I went to sleep, and he was gone before I woke up in the morning. Like he was trying to build whatever enterprise he could, and he was all over the place. He Yeah, he owned a kind of a Blockbuster, movie rental store before Blockbuster came about. He created crown molding for art. He created plastic tubing for trophies, like sports trophies, just like the shiny tubing. I mean, everything that you could think of. He ran a nightclub before I was born, before he met my mother. So he was all over the place, and I think that really instilled in me, or his personality is one that's just very intense, very aggressive, very just find a problem, solve a problem. And so that was the nature of which I was raised. And my mother's the exact same way, right? They're obviously compatible. So I was really pushed to, with any challenge, just give it my all. But I think specifically, given my father's just hunger to create success for himself, I really looked towards and I valued the importance of something that generated income, whatever it was. Like if you could create money, somehow that was like the world telling you that there was some value in whatever you were doing. And so everything that I tried to do, at some point, I would ask myself, can I make this pay for itself, or at least pay for my time? And if I can, then I'll keep doing it. And if I can't, then I'll just give up on that and work on something else. And with few exceptions, obviously, like exercise is important just for your mental well-being and sanity and things like that. But yeah, aside from that, as I was, I think 7 or 8 years old, and I lived on the golf course. My parents had a house that had like a small hill, and on the other side of it was a fence and a golf course. And people that just, either had a bad swing or weren't very experienced in golf would kind of swing balls over on my side, and I would collect them and I would clean them up and I would kind of organize them by type and by brand and so on. And I'd kind of present them to golfers, and they would pay for their own balls to have them back. And I was super young. And then, it kind of just evolved from there. And so, yeah, I'd say like ultimately, I always ended up asking myself, can this pay for itself in some way?
Mm. I think what you described in terms of you capture the essence of what it was to to be immigrants, I suppose, is that, and this is what's really cool about, and we have the same thing in Australia, is that they bring an energy to a country that is, because they've got to make money. You quite often find a taxi driver that's got a PhD driving your cab or in your Uber, right? And they'll do what it takes, right? And it
That's right.
sounds like your dad was doing what it takes. And I think reinvigorating the blood and oxygenating the archeries of a country with migration is, and it's a big topic in America, obviously, and around the world. So, and it's a challenge. In other words, managing it, but also allowing it. So it's really fascinating. So which country was your mum and dad originally from?
Yeah, they're from Lebanon. So my dad left during the war.
Yeah.
There was lots of violence and he didn't really want to be a part of that. So he went to school in France and then he went to England and ultimately learned English and decided to come to the US because he just saw that that was the best place for, creating success for yourself. It had the most economic mobility out of anywhere that he was aware of.
Right. Yeah, it was yeah, but we're basically it's the American dream, which is actually,
That's right.
raised by and promoted by Hollywood. Um, so and yeah, I remember watching Disneyland, it was Disney show on Sunday nights, right? And it was just, and I had an American friend who had all these toys. He came over obviously with his parents, and he had all these toys, and went, "Gee, it is true on Disney." Like that's so. Look, I grew up in a working class family. My dad was a plumber. He ran a quite successful plumbing business, and we'll be called like a middle class trades person. Dad was, and we were. So, um, but yeah, it's the American dream is something that is certainly a thing that's been promoted through Hollywood a lot, which is actually fascinating to watch. So, look, I've been to
It
America a lot.
worked on me. I definitely embodied like the idea that if I worked hard one day, I'd be able to own my own home and I'd be able to have the white picket fence and I'd be able to have the wife and the kids and I would like live this perfect idyllic life. And it was just like that was the goal. And if I could, scramble my way to achieving that, that was kind of the whole objective from really as young as I can remember. That was the goal.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have that. I think the trouble is there's motivation doesn't rise out of comfort. It actually rises out of hard times. And sometimes, and I reflect on it, is that motivation for me has risen out of tough times every time,
That's right. Yeah.
every time. And so you've got to be careful of comfort.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I completely agree.
once you have enough money, you sort of sit back and going, oh, no, we're arrived.
It's such an interesting thing that like, these folks that are at like the absolute, let's say the wealthiest people on earth, like there is something fundamental that motivates them that is not just pure, money at that point because they're never going to spend it. So like what keeps them going? What keeps them continuing to hustle and push themselves and place themselves in the line of fire time and time again? It's something I'm not even sure if that's something that resonates with me because it's just like such an extreme life that it's an intense thing, right? Like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated by that as well. And one of the things I am intrigued by and curious about is where does drive come from? And because sometimes it arrives, and it happened for me when I started my website and started writing the blog back when blogs were cool back in 2008, 9. And I was like a man on a mission. I was curious about social media because I thought we talked before about, you mentioned that when you got the iPhone or, in your hand, you went, wow, this is going to change the world.
Yes.
So for me, I've had, I suppose, a journey which started when I was involved in the PC industry. That I saw as significant because a computer on everyone's desk and everyone's home, is that what it became? But for me, one of the first aha moments was when I actually fired up the internet and downloaded Netscape and started browsing the web in an ugly, slow way. I went, I no longer need to go to the library. This is going to change education. And that was 1995, right?
Yeah.
Then the social media showed up, and then the iPhone showed up as it reached critical mass. And I believe that was a perfect storm, the intersection of both of those technologies, social media and the phone together. That was a perfect storm of making all of us publishers that can reach the world and do things at scale. And that excited me. And now we have AI, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we live in very exciting times, and I'm like you said, you're excited for the next 10 years, and I'm excited for the next generation as well. So for me, it's fascinating. So let's go back to, you're at school. You're obviously an overachiever. You are being, put a few classes up. So you decided though to go and do a Bachelor of Science degree. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I was in high school and, I had to go, when you apply to college, they force you to declare a major. And I didn't really know what I wanted at the time. So I remember I actually, kind of going back to what I was saying before, I literally fired up my search engine. I think I was using Yahoo back then, or maybe it was Google. And I typed in top paying jobs and I hit enter. And I clicked on the first link, I clicked on the second link, and I was like cross-referencing links, and I was just looking, and I was invalidating them. So I think the first one was like anesthesiologist or something like that. I was like, I don't want to do that. I think the next one was like lawyer. Like I don't want to do that either. I don't want to like compromise on morals to make money. Next one was dentist. I was like, I don't want to look at people's mouths all day. And I just kept going through the list until I think software engineer was like 7 or 8. And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. I took AP computer science in school. I really liked it. I think you tried the acronym. I don't even know how I would pronounce it. MMORPG. It's massive multiplayer online role-playing game. It's a video game. And so
Right.
I had hosted my own video game server with a friend of mine.
Yep.
And we had people come and play. And ultimately I was able to, I always ask myself, can I make this make money? We ended up making some money. But, back then I was like really basic programming. Like I was changing just the image of something, of some boss to make it look a little bit cooler. I was creating some custom devil wings that was some like special armor, things like that. So really basic programming, but it worked and people were paying me for it and it was awesome. And so I thought, hey, I could do software engineering. And, if my code fails, the only thing that happens is people can't play their video game for an extra hour. So it would be okay. Nobody's life is in my hands. I'm not compromising anything fundamental. And so I thought, that's what I'll do. And so I decided to pursue a Bachelor of Science in computer science.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it was interesting you mentioned about online gaming. In fact, the online gaming industry now is bigger than the whole, I think, entertainment Hollywood.
Really?
Yeah, it's double the size of it.
Wow. Like
It's
esports.
Sorry.
Esports, like online gaming, basically. The
Yeah.
industry is
Yeah.
bigger than
Yeah.
Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, and the rest of the media. Yeah. It's enormous. It was a niche. Um, so I interviewed a Swedish guy recently, actually, and he actually worked for Nokia and created the first online games for phones, I think, back in the early 2000s and so on. And back then it was like a niche. Now you have huge events and conferences where 20, 30, 40,000 people show up to these conferences that are all about gaming, online gaming. So it's fascinating that these things have happened in one generation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get to, from in my lifetime growing up with like the original Game Boy and things like that, and the advancement in graphics and the actual gameplay and the storytelling. I mean, it is incredible what modern games can do and what they're going to do. And I can only imagine like when I'm, let's say in another 50 years, right? And, let's say I don't really have the energy to go hiking and go, travel the world, but I can put on some headset or I can tap into some system and really like drop into this world physically and feel the world and be able to experience the world. I understand some people think that's dystopian, but for me, especially like as I approach the end of my life, being able to do that and be able to basically be a superhero in this world, I think is going to be absolutely incredible. And I look forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting because I just tried the Apple Pro Vision headset recently.
Yeah.
It was just put it on, had a look through it. I really didn't get into it. So I've got a lovely friend of mine who's a venture capitalist, and he drags them around to restaurants. It's rather embarrassing. He turns up at the restaurant with his Pro Vision and wanted me to wear it. I go, okay, it looks, I'm going, this is maybe not the place to be trialing this, but it's okay. So, but there's a question there is the Apple Pro Vision device, which Apple released a year ago and basically started selling, I think, 6 or 7 months ago, has not sold that well in terms of the scale. It's also very expensive. What's your view on that immersive world, virtual reality with headsets? Is it too early? In other words, good idea, but too early at the moment, and technology's, too not there yet.
Yeah, so first of all, I purchased also the Vision Pro. I played around with it. Ultimately, I decided it's too heavy, it's too uncomfortable. I'm not going to use this. So I ended up returning it. And when I look at the device, I think that it's trying to bridge the gap between where we are and where Apple wants to get to, which I think is an inevitability. We're going to get there at some point in the next, let's say, 20 years. It's going to take some time because most of this is going to be processing power that they're trying to get as light as possible to be as comfortable as just a pair of glasses.
Yep.
And that device in particular, I put it on and I can imagine that future. They had a really great demo in the store. And if you haven't done the in-store Apple demo, highly recommend that because you really do get a sense of like where this is going. But no, this is right now, it's really a device that's marketing towards developers that they're hoping will be inspired by these devices and will create content for them. So at some point in the future, they'll release an actual consumer-friendly device at an accessible price point that people will purchase and use. I think it was a very, I would say like arguably a bold move for them to release that the way that it was, because it definitely felt unfinished. But it's coming. I think that I'm not as bullish on AR VR as I am with kind of like the modern large language models and what they're going to do for human productivity over the next 10 years. But it's coming. It's definitely coming. And by the end of my lifetime, I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. And I think maybe that vision that Mark Zuckerberg had with the metaverse, and even changed the name of Facebook to Metaverse, has been put a little bit on hold as he leans now into AI, because something that can be used. And it's very interesting to watch. He spent about 40, 50 billion trying to make Metaverse work, and it sort of wasn't. What's interesting too is well, the other thing that's interesting too is we know Facebook have brought out their Meta glasses, okay, which are Ray-Bans, which I actually have, right? So it's in their little box here. Again, I think it's a great idea, and actually they've sold quite a lot of them. But I think when they get the Vision Pro into something like that, that's when it's going to play. So it's basically making it light enough, small enough, powerful enough to be put into something that who's going to walk down the street like with a headphone like that? I won't.
I won't either.
No. All right. So let's lean back into the past so we can lean into the future. Okay. So you eventually started a PhD in 2015, and it involved AI as part of that. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because then that will lead to what you're doing with Ownwell. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was doing applied machine learning for optimizing distributed systems. So, machine learning, AI, very similar thing. I think when people reference AI nowadays, they're referencing like the modern large language models, which, were not something that we were really using at the time. And it wasn't really the use case that I was looking to optimize for anyway. So distributed systems we have a bunch of different computers. We want them to work well together, to mesh well together. And specifically, our research was funded by the Army Research Lab, and they were looking for kind of a mesh network system that would allow us to connect multiple devices, whether you have laptops, you have vehicles, you have drones, and you want them to all be able to communicate well and be able to accomplish a mission together. And so, for example, one of the early projects that we worked on was being able to use drones to map out a building. The use case that we actually published was that there was a fire in the building, and we wanted to be able to deploy drones to look for the fire in the building and actually do like a 3D reconstruction of the building and find the fire. And then you would wear an AR, not a VR, so an augmented reality headset, and you'd be able to see through walls and be able to actually see where the fire is. So there's a lot of really cool research that is involved in that, like localization, mapping, being able to basically see the space and reconstruct the space, and then be able to control the drones and make sure they don't crash into walls and things like that. So that was a great project. Eventually I ended up working more towards optimizing data systems. And so that's basically, we have a sea of machines and they all have data on them, and everybody's accessing, storing, updating, needing to optimize, for whatever their application is. Everybody needs to access data at some point. And so the question is like, what's the optimal placement of that data? And so I built a little AI tool, a machine learning tool that would essentially look at how the system was being used and reconfigure and optimize itself. So it was kind of not quite what people think of when they think of modern AI, but it was like applying machine learning towards computer systems problems.
Right.
So that was the research that I did. And I don't know if it directly maps to what I'm doing at Ownwell, but certainly we have lots of data management and a lot of data optimization, and we certainly use lots of machine learning and AI today.
Yeah. It's very interesting about if you look at the human brain and the fact that it's so densely filled with neurons, and we look at neuroscience, then we look at AI. If you want high performance, you need to actually have not only the processor near the memory, but also near other computers.
That's right.
And I believe in Texas, for example, not, actually in Las Vegas, there's one data center, it's one of the biggest in the world, has got a 1 mile backbone, which connects all the computers together.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting in terms of the explanation for me. I'm trying to remember the book I was reading about it, but the fact is that we're trying to densely pack
that's right.
computer neurons as close together. And that sounds like you're sort of working on something like that.
That's right. Yeah. Ultimately, when you start to get into very large scale systems, interconnects become the bottleneck, and that becomes the critical path. So if you can optimize or minimize the amount of interconnection, the amount of communication that you have to swap back and forth between machines, that tends to lead to much more efficient systems.
Yeah. And I found that fascinating that neuroscience has made a big impact with large language models and AI. So, and that was fascinating. Um, so you doing the PhD, you've done that, sounds fascinating, but you want to do something that more was applied AI or applied technology,
Sure.
rather than just, in other words, you thought, your PhD was complex, and then you decided to go and start a company and discover that actually that's even more complex because it involves humans. Um,
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you're trying to work out whether they want to buy anything that you actually think they will buy, and you discover that maybe they don't, and then you've got to work out pivot to something else, and then you've actually got to do marketing, then you actually got to manage people. So there's this the dynamics of humanity are messy, and
Absolutely. I
yeah,
remember, like, as a researcher, it's just sitting in essentially a corner thinking of problems. Think like you're reading all the literature, you're reading what like the current state of the art is. You're looking at thinking about where are the gaps or what are the problems that currently exist in the space that haven't quite been addressed. It's like it's very pure in that sense, right? And it's very personal, it's very individual. You have your advisor who's constantly giving you advice and kind of steering you in the right direction. You have your lab mates who we bounce ideas off of each other. But like at the end of the day, it's just you and whatever you can think of, whatever you really want to work on.
right.
Totally different than, building a company where the customer, the user, the person who you're building for is everything. And they steer everything, and you will live and die by what they say.
Mm.
And so it was a complete 180 from the peach. I took some lessons and some learnings and some really more like mental fortitude lessons, I would say, is really what the PhD taught me, is just like to slog through the challenges. But I didn't even experience challenges, or there's a brand new scale when you're building for actual people that they have needs, they have demands, they have expectations, and you have to meet those. And if you don't, then they're going to go to somebody who will satisfy their needs. That's not you. And so it was, yeah, um, completely different world.
Okay. So where did the inspiration and idea come from to start Ownwell, which is helping manage the complexities of owning multiple real estate?
That's right.
Where did that, was it a problem you saw? Was it a problem someone mentioned to you and said, can we solve this together? Where did the inspiration come from? The aha moment going, I reckon there's something here, that a problem we need to solve, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started the company with my partner, and it was his idea. So he actually was an asset manager at a family office. So they were managing a billionaire's portfolio, and they were trying to create returns on that on
Hmm.
that on that money. And real estate was obviously a phenomenal investment vehicle. And in order to maximize the ROI, and they wanted to minimize their tax burden, and so they had an entire team that would appeal the entire real estate portfolio every year. To appeal the portfolio essentially means you contest the assessment that the county assessor sets the value of the real estate, and you pay your property tax as a percentage of the value of that real estate. And so, they were trying to minimize that in order to maximize their ROI. And Colton was there, and he was thinking, it's crazy that a billionaire is taking advantage of this system that most Americans don't even know exists, and don't take advantage of, certainly. And there's a bunch of reasons why that's the case, but ultimately it's it's very difficult for the traditional providers would be like an accountant or like a lawyer that would appeal your portfolio for you. You can also do it yourself, but that requires real estate knowledge, real estate expertise, and to have the authority to walk up to an assessor and say, your number is wrong and my number is right, and here's why. And so, he had this idea. So he went to business school at UCLA. He was doing his MBA. I was completing my PhD. I was like roaming around campus one night thinking about a problem, and I saw an ad for a pitch competition by the law school, the UCLA Law School. And I had this idea from my sneakerbot days. I had this idea that I could fight fraud. I could fight online fraud using AI. And so I assembled a little pitch deck and I went to the competition and I pitched my idea. And it didn't really resonate with people because AI was not hyped at the time like it is today. So I sat back down, and then Colton went up. And Colton pitched this business model of the fact that there are simplified models that the assessor uses to set the value of real estate every single year, because there's millions of properties and there's only a handful of assessors that have to set those values. It's way too complicated. So they use these, off-the-shelf models that you can basically purchase. You plug in some values, it spits out stuff, right? Like every square foot increases the value by a certain number of dollars. And so he pitched the idea, and it completely resonated with me. I loved it. And so, yeah, that's how we got started.
Cool. That's interesting because the being able to challenge the valuation by the authorities is not something we have in Australia. So, well, I don't believe so. Maybe we do, but I've heard that a lot of times the local councils set the valuation, and good luck with trying to get that back, like trying to get that lowered. Pandemic prices went up. Councils are now left, and local governments left it at that level. The valuations have come back down. Good luck with actually changing that. So in America, you actually are able to challenge the valuation.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure how the system works in Australia. Maybe one day we'll do some research and we'll consider expanding. But yeah, here, every one of the 3,000 counties in the US is responsible for levying the assessments and then the property taxes for each of those properties. And so they all have their own systems and their own way of doing things. And some of them are sophisticated shops that really, nail it. And some of them are, just a couple folks in a federal building or a state building, that are just, they're just, they have to assess the values every single year, and they don't necessarily know exactly how, because there's lots of properties. And so, yeah, they use these models, and there's a formal process by which you can contest those models. You can contest the assessment. It depends on the jurisdiction. It's called various things: property grievance, property appeal, tax protest here in Texas. And so, yeah, you can basically, you file some paperwork that says, I think your value is wrong. I think that my value is better, and here's why. Oftentimes that then leads to some sort of negotiation process. And if that doesn't go well, you'll actually go to a formal hearing. It's almost like a traffic court hearing. It's kind of, it is formal, but at the same time, it's fast. It's fairly expedient. It's anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes. You go in, you present your case, the assessor presents their case, and then there's essentially a board of judges that render a verdict on what the actual value should be.
Okay. So you saw the problem. It's complex. It's messy. It's basically, you can save people money by getting the valuation changed, lowered. So did you start and create a minimal viable software platform to help you with that first, and just targeted that? And did you add anything else on top of that? In other words, did you start with an MVP, which is that particular problem, and then have you added to that? I'd be curious, because sometimes you build a model going, I think people want A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they only want A and B, or they want X, right?
Yeah.
So what did you do? Did you build a minimal viable product?
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to validate this was a real problem. So Colton said it sounded nice. I love the idea, but let's prove it. So the first thing we did is, most of this data, or at least especially for like the larger metro cities, it's online public record data. So you can just download it. It's a large data set. It's difficult to manage, but that's my specialty. So I knew how to handle that. And so I would download these data sets, I would load it in my system, and I started writing algorithms that would essentially analyze the assessments and look for gaps. Right? And let me try to like summarize how these models work. So imagine like a plot, right, where you have like the size of the home and you have the value of the home. Now, generally, as you get bigger, the value is going to go up, right? So it's like generally you're going to see a trend that goes up and to the right. And so what these, more simplistic models will do is they'll just slap a best fit line on there, right? But that's not actually how real estate works, right? Like a slightly bigger home might not be worth that much more. It might not be worth exactly the same amount as a smaller home. And so by doing that, you end up having dots above the best fit line that are brought down to that best fit. And so those are going to be underassessed. And you have dots down here that are going to be brought up. So they're going to be overassessed. And I was basically just writing algorithms looking for those guys. And as it turns out, yeah, there's definitely gaps, especially if you look at, more fine grained analysis. I was analyzing property by property and trying to look at like that neighborhood, those property characteristics, nearby properties, recent sales, things like that. And I would find that, yeah, there's definitely properties that are being overassessed. And so, okay, there's a problem. And there's a system that theoretically can solve the problem. Why aren't people doing it? It's a pain in the butt, right? And the services out there, that'll do it for you will charge more than you'll end up saving. Yeah. And so our thought process was that we could use technology to essentially automate some of the underlying processes involved in the actual bureaucratic appeal and be able to streamline it. So that way we could charge a much more affordable rate and still be able to service, whether you've got a mobile home or whether you've got a mansion, we'll be able to service you. That was like the dream. But we were very the opposite of efficient at first, right? So we did everything manually. I threw up a Wix website. I didn't even bother making a website. We just said, hey, let's see if people will even sign up for this. I did my analysis. We had our list, and we were basically marketing to those particular individuals, saying, I have analyzed your particular property. Your particular property is assessed by the assessor at this. I think it should be this. You could go contest it, and if you should, please contest it. But if you don't want to, we'll do it for you, and we'll just charge a flat contingency 25%, and that's how we got started. That we were just, it's pure contingency based, and the idea there is, I think there's less friction from an individual that it's like, oh, like you're only going to get a piece of what you save us. So if you don't save us anything, you're not going to charge us anything. And from my perspective too, that business model resonates with me because it feels like it's either a win-win or there's no downside. And so I love that. And so I will never try to change that model. I will push that we will always run with that value proposition of pure contingency. If we don't save you money, we don't charge anything. And so even when we had a lousy Wix site, and even though we had never filed an appeal before, well, Colton had when he was at that family office, but we didn't really know what we were doing. People were signing up. Like I was sending out that marketing material, and people were signing up with us, and it was awesome. And so then we had to figure out how to actually do the thing. So, I was figuring out all the paperwork. What do I need to file? Who do I file it with? Do I need to like get it certified? Do I need to get it notarized? All that information, file it with the county. Then there was this whole process of back and forth for scheduling and so on. We had to assemble our evidence, and we had to file the evidence, and then they would send their evidence, and then we had to go to hearings, and we had never gone to hearings before. And so we're showing up to these hearings, and we're trying to argue, and this assessor has done this 500 million times, and I am there for my first time, and I'm trying to say this property is assessed too high. And they're trying to tell me how I don't know the neighborhood, and I haven't walked the neighborhood, and they've walked the neighborhood every single year, and so on and so forth. And so, there's tricks. And so we learned the tricks, and we probably bought a few, especially early on. We learned those tricks, and now we know how to counter these points, and we train our people. Like, this is the argument. They're always going to try to use this argument. That's an invalid argument. Here's why. Like, and then you can reference appraisal theory, and over time it built and it built and it built, and we got better and better at what we do.
Cool. So do you just do you apply it to commercial real estate as well as residential?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll appeal all real estate.
Right. Because what's interesting is that around the world, and especially in America, I've seen, and valuations in LA, I've seen for commercial real estate have plummeted.
Yeah.
In fact, in New York, I saw one high-rise building was actually sold for 95% less than it was valued at. So
I remember reading about that building in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was,
yeah. So commercial real estate is much more objective because people buy a home. When you buy your home, it's because it's a very emotional decision. I want to live in this home. I want to raise my family in this home. When you buy commercial real estate, it is a pure, like, this is an investment. What is the investment going to return? Am I going to pay for it or not? And so it's much more tied to the markets. And so when interest rates go up, right, and when vacancies go up, commercial real estate really plummets. It's much more variable. And so it benefits much more greatly from an appeal than your home. But I can save you $1,000, that's a win no matter what.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I was just fascinated about whether you did commercial as well as
Yeah.
residential. So you've done a test. So you test the model, you get people signing up. Now the challenge is scaling this, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So how'd you go with that?
So we took, you could argue whether this is the right approach or not, and we did. But ultimately, this is what we ended up doing. We did our analysis. We analyzed the market size. We analyzed kind of the number of properties that were overassessed. And from our initial tests, we ballparked, this is what our conversion looks like. This is how much it's going to take to appeal and so on. And so we roughly estimated that we could about 80x if we wanted to just like really just kind of take the market based on our analysis. That we could roughly 80x from where we were, which was like, three of us just trying to do things ourselves. I think it was like four or five maybe at the time. And so we said, okay, let's raise some money and we'll tell them that it's purely for marketing to these individuals and trying to grow. And my co-founder, he actually had some connections to VC. He's amazing. He's got all these skills that I certainly don't have. My skill set is I always thought about going like very, very deep and very specialized in my expertise. And he's much more of like he understands so much more and he's much more broad in his business knowledge. Part of that was raising money. So he went and he raised some money, and then we did that, and it resonated with customers, and we blew the lid off of any of our expectations with who was going and how people were going to sign up. And it was by far the most challenging time in my life when we hit our goal and we just smashed through it. We were completely unprepared for how much it resonated with our market, and we were drowning. And I was literally up every single night. We hired a few people at the time. Thankfully, we hired a number of folks that were helping us, but like there was only like 12 of us, and we were panicking. And I was up every single night, late at night, scrambling, trying to write code to automate some of these processes, bureaucratic processes, because ultimately that's what we're trying to solve for. Is when we're actually attending a hearing, that's a different game. And that's a game that we can build for and we can prepare for. But the actual, filing paperwork, scheduling paperwork, going back and forth, responding to emails, so on, that was exceptionally challenging. And so I was spending all day, all night automating processes and building software that would basically do it for us. So because there was no way that we were going to be able to handle the volume and the demand that came through. And it was a blessing, absolutely a blessing. I definitely lost some hair. I lost a lot of hair during that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because scaling involves good processes, obviously that was what you had to really work on. The other thing too is that would be the drive of your business, the oil for what you do is the data.
Totally.
So were you able to use publicly available data, or did you have to go and scrape it, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I would say that having the highest quality data lake is really what sets you apart in this business, right? Like you said, there's that, and then there's actually having the expertise of being able to walk into that hearing with confidence and argue with the data. But yeah, from the start, that was something that I knew was going to be a long-term investment. It's not something that comes immediately. So anywhere that I can get my hands on quality data, I'm going to do it. If I have to buy it, I'll buy it. If it's online, I'm going to take it online. If it's free public record data, so on and so forth, I'm taking it. And whatever I can get and I can clean and I can prepare and essentially have redundancy in place so I can cross-reference and I can make sure and have confidence in my data. Always going to do that. And so if there is a way to get real estate data, we have done it or tried to do it. And ultimately, that's what allowed us to prepare for the high volume that ended up coming through. I wasn't so worried about that because I knew that was going to be a problem. And that's the nice thing about building software systems is that they inherently scale, right? If I didn't know who was going to sign up for Ownwell, then I knew that I had to essentially build it for the entire jurisdiction or the entire county or the entire state. And so it was already prepared at that point. It was really like the bureaucratic pipes that I was not prepared for at all. But yeah, no, the data lake is everything here.
Cool. So making sense of data, though, requires other technology, and AI is one of those other technologies. So do you apply AI in terms of pattern recognition, making sense of the noise? Do you use AI for any of that or more?
So yes and no. What I would say is that I could build a model that takes input data and spits out an accurate assessment. And I could walk into a hearing and I could say, hey, my AI model says that this property should be this, not that. And they're going to laugh me out of the room. And so ultimately, you have to have explainable models. And so I'm not using black box systems, right? I'm not using neural networks. I'm not using large language models that just take an input and spit out output. I'm building explainable systems. And
Right.
that was actually a whole part of my research in the PhD was building explainable models. And so, yeah, so ultimately, I'm assembling when it really comes down to it, on the end of on the actual building of the case, we are using explainable, basically rule-based models, as opposed to kind of more sophisticated AI models. Those models are used really everywhere else in the business. Like somebody sends an email, we want to understand the email, we want to make sure, classify it, we want to see if we can auto respond to it, we can update our system based on that. Let's say some county representative says, "Hey, can we change your hearing date from, the 14th to the 18th?" I want to be able to check and see, is that fine? And then be able to basically give the green light and auto respond or things like that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. In other words, you're building what is one of the big, I suppose, issues with AI models, large language models, are that there are black boxes. There's very little transparency. And a simple part of that is, and we're seeing it now come into, is more transparency is creeping in terms of if you go to ChatGPT and going, okay, here's a question, or give me an outline, or what's the answer to this, this, and this, and then you're going, but please provide the sources.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're going, well, I want to check the validity of what you've told me, because
And it will hallucinate, right? It will lie to you because it's like taking in so many different sources and conflicting sources, and it has to come to an answer, and it wants to give you the most, satisfying or compelling answer. So
yeah. Yeah, it is really quite fascinating to watch this, and we're seeing the challenge with. I think the number so far is that some calculations by, I think, Sequoia Capital, saying that 600 billion has been spent in the last 2 or 3 years on infrastructure, especially software, general platforms, data centers, processors, right? Data, so it's a big money. I'm going, oh, everyone's nervous because where's the real savings? And you're going, well, hang on, we are 2 years in. It is Wild West at the moment.
Totally. And right, it's an arms race, right? This is essentially the Cold War nuclear arms race. Who is going to get to the best model first? Because they're going to just be able to dominate everybody else.
Yeah. And for me, I wrote an article recently, which is, where is the money going? In other words, where is the investment money going in AI? And it was fascinating. I wanted to get I wanted to stand back and look at the landscape and going, where is the money being spent? And part of that was looking at investing in some what I call AI ETFs, EFTs. That what we needed to do was I just wanted to go, and because I was talking to a financial advisor and looking at, and I went, I just want to get a sense of the beat of the street. In other words, and we've got wild valuations. I think Nvidia's 90 times, earnings, right? That's possibly a bubble, but on top of that, we've seen Tesla fall and rise and rise and fall. I still think Tesla's models maybe. I think China's going to blow it up, but that's another story. In terms of subsidized EVs, so there's a lot. The whole investment game and the future is, good luck with predicting the future.
Totally. Yeah, the investing game is not one that I'm good at, right? I am just buy into the index and just let it ride. If I'm going to make my bets, it's going to be on my own company.
Yep. Yeah, and exactly. So my investment strategy is very much just index funds. This is not financial advice, guys, by the way. This is just personal experience being shared. But the reality is that, index funds, set it, let it go. And passive investment has been shown to beat active financial investment. And the active financial investment managers are going, oh, no. I'm going, the data tells something else. So it's very, very interesting to actually watch that. So anyway, and I've got a little investment in a startup out of New Zealand, which has proved to be very, very good.
Cool.
But that's almost more good luck than good management again. So anyway, it's fascinating. So, so you guys are raising more money. What's the future look like for you? It sounds like you've actually you said you blew the lid off what your projections were. So what's the future look like for you guys? Are you going to do more with what you've got? Are you going to expand the market? Uh, what's it look like for you guys? And what's the size of your team, if you're willing to share that?
Yeah, so that was a few years ago. So we've grown quite a bit, over 100 on the team now.
Wow.
You know,
Mm.
we that yeah. So ever since then, once I lost all my hair and I realized that I needed to invest in this and that it really did resonate with the market, I essentially just started building the pipes and saying I want to create the most robust system in the world for automating this bureaucratic process. And
Mm.
so, nowadays somebody signs up, we essentially do all our checks on our end. We do have humans looking for, especially like looking at our case, making sure that we have the best possible case. My thought process is essentially I want to supercharge our best people with technology to enable them to do even more. And that's really my whole thought process with how technology should work is that, and even AI, it's not here to replace humans, it's here to supercharge us.
Yes.
And so that's what we're doing here. Building for many years now. Things are going well. Continuing to try to expand the market and see if there are new folks. Every single year, new folks buy their first home. Every single year, new folks become overassessed because the model ends up deciding that they become overassessed. And so there's always going to be a market to grow into. But if I think about the future of the company, it's the reason we called ourselves Ownwell, instead of like appeal your property taxes, is because our forward looking, what we really want to do is help people. We want to be like that financial advocate for your real estate, right? Everybody's out there telling you how you should optimize your stock portfolio. But nobody's out there really taking a look at your real estate finances and telling you, here are the gaps, here's where you can improve, especially for, the everyday American homeowner. And so the way that I think about this is I want to build a really smart assistant that's going to essentially, you put everything on autopilot. You give us like the core information that we need to do our analysis every single year, and we will just make sure that you're optimizing that asset. And if we ever think there's an opportunity for you to save or for you, to turn it into a more lucrative financial asset, we'll offer that recommendation. So for example, most recently, we just launched, actually just a few weeks ago, we just launched our insurance agent where you can put some basic information about your home insurance, and we'll constantly monitor in the background with a number of different providers, dozens of different providers, and see if you have the best rate on the market. And if we see that there is another provider that can offer you either a better premium or a better deductible, so on and so forth, we will only in that situation surface that recommendation to you without compromising any of your contact information. So you're not getting spammed with email and phone calls and all this from all these agents trying to sell you on their policy. And that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. So I'm just thinking, can I really just put everything on autopilot and make your home a perfectly optimized financial asset? And that's really the direction that we're hoping to take the company.
Right. So that's in terms of the costs of managing the asset. Is that what you're talking about more than anything else?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because the other valuation, places to buy, like Austin, Texas, for example, real estate prices are going up more than, somewhere in the Midwest or whatever. And, it's got basically a lot of industries are moving into Austin and Texas and so on because of various things like less taxes, I believe. That's why people go to Nevada, right?
Yep.
But this goes on. So it's messy. So yeah, that's an amazing growth story, Joseph, in terms of 100 people now. Are you still raising capital, need to, or is it basically becoming it's bootstrapped now and you're profitable and got good cash flows?
We're in a very advantageous position where we don't have to. I think that it's always a conversation that we have. Like, can we, put some more accelerant into the business with some additional capital? And I think that we are probably looking, but it's not essential, right? We can continue to bootstrap the business from this point forward, and it's like a win-win scenario. And that's, I guess, the best place to be.
Yeah. So when you started doing it, were there any competitors in the marketplace and have any arisen?
Yeah, definitely. But yes to both. So there are
Right.
some traditional providers, and there are some new guys trying to they're trying to replicate us.
Yeah. The ultimate form of flattery.
I'm not worried about it. Yeah, no, good luck. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you think you've built a big enough moat to actually make yourself quite protected?
I think if you wanted to be really good at this business, It requires special skills that take years to invest in. And especially, I mean, if you look at the traditional providers, if you have a certified appraiser, certified commercial appraiser analyzing a particular commercial property, and he's spending or she's spending an hour analyzing that property, they're walking the perimeter, they're looking at neighboring comps and so on, they're dissecting the financials, like they are going to do a phenomenal job. They're just going to charge you a fortune to do that. And so, there's obviously that traditional provider. And then, you've got these kind of young upstarts that think that it's just a marketing play. It's not a marketing play. There's so much under the hood that you have to build to make this system work. And like, good luck, honestly. Like let's fight on fair ground.
Yeah. In other words, they're bringing a knife to a gunfight, as we say. So essentially, you've disrupted what was a very traditional industry with technology.
I'd say that's roughly accurate. Yeah. I'd say real estate in general needs to be, it's one of the more resistant industries to kind of the surge of technological innovation.
Yeah. And it's a lot of industries that are very entrenched and actually have been around, let's say 50, 100 years, even longer. Education, been around forever. Technology is threatened to actually disrupt education, and it has in a way, but on the other hand, the school systems are still very much the same. So it's fascinating to watch the rise of technology that challenges the status quo, but it takes generations sometimes to change things. And yeah, it's just interesting to watch. I was an ex-high school teacher, so a bit like Waltz, really. But the reality is that education is a very traditional industry. Then you have a look at higher education. That's almost even more, I suppose, not calcified is not the right term, but still very much centuries and centuries of actual processes and approach. How dare you, do it this way because it's been done like this for 300 years. Yeah. So, So just to sum things up, what are the biggest lessons you've learned along the way as an entrepreneur? And also, I've got another question too. Who are some of the mentors and resources that have helped you along the way? Maybe do that first, and then the last one is, what are a few tips you could give to people that want to start their startup?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first that I'll say with regards to mentors, I take inspiration from lots of people, and at the end of the day, I think that like the best mentors are the ones that I can read about or read from, right? So when there's a really phenomenal book written directly from somebody that has achieved the kind of success in the kind of industry that I'm looking to do, I can't imagine where I could get more insight, more knowledge. So thinking off the top of my head, love Mark Andreessen. I think he's an inspiration. You mentioned Netscape, right? Like one of the true innovations of the last, I don't know, 200 years. Like truly, the internet was phenomenal, and the web browser, right? The visual internet was phenomenal. Steve Jobs, I mentioned the iPhone. The iPhone blew my mind. When the iPhone came out, I was like, oh, this is going to change everything forever. Like I'm laying in bed I'm connected to the world, laying in bed. This is it. And so that I was so captivated by that. I think that also, like, if you look at like leaders, Andy Grove from Intel, absolutely. And so, yeah, there's a long list, and I pride myself on, being able to, the fact that like we have this library of books of all these incredibly intelligent, successful people that are just openly willing to share their knowledge with us. And from my perspective, I also love podcasts. Actually, I listen to tons and tons of podcasts because it's just so convenient. I'm in the car. I can just, gain some knowledge for the next 20 minutes. In terms of some advice, I think, you mentioned it first, which was, you got to be uncomfortable in order to like push yourself, in order to like unlock something, right? And ultimately, if you aren't where you want to be, then you have to unlock something that isn't there today. And so the only way to do that is to create some discomfort, right? To create some opportunity for you to be challenged or to push yourself. Something that requires you to push yourself. That's the best way, I think, to really level up in life. And I think people often get scared of those challenges, right? They have their system, but if you continue to do the same thing that you've always done, you're going to continue to be the same person that you've always been. And if that's what you want to be, great. But if you want to achieve something new, it fundamentally requires you to do something different and to lean into that challenge. Mark Andreessen talks about the 4 types of luck. Highly recommend that essay to anybody that's trying to create success for themselves, because he's right. I got lucky, 100%. I got lucky. And it's not blind luck like I walked into a bag of cash. It's a different kind of luck. And it was really the second and third types of luck that ended up creating some success for myself. The second being keep trying stuff, like stir the pot. The more you, it's like the primordial soup of life, right? You've got so much activity happening that eventually something will pop, right? So that's the second type of luck. The third type is that you become so knowledgeable in something, you have such specialized knowledge that when the opportunity arises, you can capitalize on it. So somebody who really understood cryptocurrency, who understood the blockchain, who was invested in Bitcoin early on, they got lucky, but they didn't get lucky, right? They knew that that was an opportunity that was going to come. And then the fourth type of luck is somebody who is so good at something, just the absolute master in it, that whenever the opportunity arises, people go and pursue them. And that's the hardest type. That those are like the special people in the universe, right? The absolute unicorns. But I think the second and third are very practical, and I continue to try to embody those and continue to try to be lucky in the company.
So it sounds like you do a lot of reading. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, reading and podcasts, right? Which I think is just an extension of that. How else are you going to learn?
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about a book, I've been a big book reader since I started, reading. I think about 6 or 7, and I became librarian's best friend at lunchtimes. I love sports too, so I suppose, an introvert and an extrovert in terms of I played sport, plus I hid in the library occasionally and would just read at night until, I would read under the covers because curfew was 8:30, right, or going to bedtime. Right. And
sometimes I was in there with my Game Boy, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. So I did a lot of reading late at night when my parents thought I was asleep. I would wait to hear mum and dad down the corridor actually go quiet and going, okay, I can turn my lamp on now and grab my book and read. And what I love about books, especially the ones you mentioned, which are, stories and insights by successful people, famous people, is that they've in just a couple of 100 pages have distilled their insights. And it is decades and a lifetime of insights. And one of the most interesting books I read recently is Poor Charlie's Almanac by Charlie Munger, where he talks about the 90 to 100 mental models he's developed over, and he died last year, nearly 100 years old, at 99 less 3 months, 100 years less 3 months. It was fascinating to see his generalist approach to investing, because he said that a company is like a human organism. So you've basically got to apply psychology, economics, maths, neuroscience, it just goes on and on. And it was fascinating. One of the most fascinating books I've read for a long time. And that's 100 years of his life put into a book. Like you're going to find wisdom.
Absolutely. Each of these folks, they're obviously not the same. They've each developed and honed their own strategy to life. And I think it's so interesting that there's all these different ways to be successful. You don't have to adopt a very particular mindset or a very particular strategy, but each of these folks has their own, and maybe taking bits and pieces, you can create your own strategy.
Yeah. One of my favorite tales is is King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And part of that story is where they all go into the forest alone, where there is no path. And I think out of that, we're all going to find our own path and create our own path, because we are not anyone else. We are who we are, with our own skills, own experience, own passions, innate abilities. And your challenge in life, I think, is actually try and find where that lies and create your own path. And that's where the adventure lies.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So, Joseph, thank you very much for sharing your learning and insights. And I find it fascinating. And good luck with the future. It sounds like you're on a fast train. to being bigger and better and offering value to the world, which is you're solving problems. And that is just awesome. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and passion. I can see it shining through. And thank you very much. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you, Jeff. I had a great time.